probably was one of those memory verses that you could quickly remember if you were ever in a Bible drill. We don't do those too much with kids anymore, but when I was little growing up, we would sometimes have Bible drills, and we had memory verses, and sometimes we'd meet a few minutes before church service, and Brother Earl Chaffin, Earl and Madge worshiped with us, and they never had any of the kids of their own, but Earl sort of took an interest in the kids at church, and he would sometimes have Bible drills. In fact, I found an old mimeograph sheet that, it's 40-something years old, nearly 50 years old, that he'd given us as a study sheet, and he'd ask sometimes quizzes and stuff and doing that. But sometimes we would be asked, does anyone know a memory verse? And of course, the one I could always remember was Jesus wept, and so that was one that I could remember. But this morning's lesson is taken from John chapter 11, and I know Charles preached in John chapter 10 last week, so we're going to maybe make a few references back to John chapter 10, but John chapter 11. To put it in context, John 10 really covered a lot. John 10 jumped a little bit. It covered several months because we have Jesus sort of ending one feast, and then John chapter 10 jumps over to the Feast of Dedication in that same chapter. And the Feast of Dedication was a wintertime feast, and what we know today is Hanukkah. So several months were really jumped in John chapter 10. And John chapter 11, John's not too worried about chronological things. He wants you to know the story of Jesus because he believes that once you hear the story of Jesus, that you will believe in Jesus. And so he was sort of, that was his main desire to get the story out. So in John chapter 10, it talked about Jesus sort of inviting the people to be his flock. He says, I'm the good shepherd. And the people who hear my voice, they are like the good shepherd whose sheep hear his voice. And now in chapter 11, we begin to see how Jesus reacts to the death of one of his lambs. And we believe that Jesus had a very, very close relationship with his family of Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. Most of us growing up, if we had very many siblings in the household, when our parents would sometimes get addled, they'd start calling kids' names out. You ever had that? And then we get to Michael, Steve, Judy, Mark, whichever one, so my mom would sort of rattle off. But you typically went with the oldest one first. Some of it, you would relate to that. They sort of went through that. And I jokingly said for many years, the closest my mother ever got to my actual name was Markle. And she still calls me Markle sometimes too. But I had some colleagues one day. My mom was, she brought my foster brother out to counseling, and my mother actually called me Markle in front of them. They all roared and stuff like that. But anyways, it appears that maybe Lazarus is maybe baby brother. Because if you look at sort of how it's always treated, it's either Martha, Mary, or Mary, Martha, then Lazarus. He appears to be maybe a younger sibling and stuff. But nevertheless, dearly loved. Jesus loved this family. They lived close to Jerusalem, about 2 miles. The Bible says within a short walking distance, and so Jesus knows this family. He's intimate with them. I guess to sort of put the lesson in some context where I'm heading with it, we know that what a stop sign looks like, and we know what a yield sign looks like. But there's a lot of road signs that are out there. If those of you who are 14, 15, 16 years old, getting ready to take your driver's license, you'll study those signs. And the rest of us, we forget a lot of the less regular ones. But how many knows what this sign means? You see this on a... How many knows what that means? So that's what it's thought. And how many people know that sign means there's a traffic jam? Or you expect a traffic jam because this is a place that's known for congestion and stuff like that. So spiritually, emotionally speaking, we can all get in a traffic jam, so to speak. And traffic jams are really caused by competing people trying to get to the same place at the same time, right? They all tend to be going in one direction, okay? And they're all trying to get to the same place at the same time, I'm sure no one here is that way, but the drivers who just sort of, do this all through traffic, they really don't get any further than the rest of us, but they feel like they're doing something, right? So, but basically, physically, we can feel that in tensions like that. But I'm talking specifically about spiritually, emotionally speaking, we can all get in traffic jams. And I would say, even represented here this morning, and about 200 something probably here this morning, that we're sort of jammed up at times. We're all going to the same place, but spiritually, emotionally speaking, we're at different places and points. Or maybe someone came this morning that you came here just full of joy this morning, that you just feel so unburdened. It's springtime of the year, the sap's rising, you feel better, you just feel full of joy, and you're just ready to worship. And there might have been someone here this morning that just had a hard time getting out of bed. Maybe the joints were stiff and they didn't feel good this morning, and they had every reason maybe to stay home, but they just willed themselves to be here, and they're here this morning, and they're glad they're here, and they're going to get a blessing. But there may be someone here this morning that is just so burdened. Your heart is so heavy. Maybe there's something going on in your life spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, and you're just burdened this morning. And we're all heading in the same direction. In fact, you're all, except for me, everybody's facing the same direction. But we're at different places in our spiritual, emotional walk. I think that's why God called us into community, a church, so we can help each other in doing that. In fact, I would argue that there's plenty in the Bible to support that position, that God calls us into church to make a family, to support each other in our spiritual walks and development. The text really begins, now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who had anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. So they're in Bethany. Jesus is out doing ministry, doing his mission. And Lazarus is sick. Now, he is seriously sick. And they're getting scared. He's not making any progress. So they send to Jesus, send word to him. Jesus, we know you love him. He's sick. He's really, really sick. So we have here in the thing that their younger brother may not recover. He may not make it. And I think that they just knew that if Jesus knew this, he would be here. He would want to know how sick Lazarus was. And so they sent word to him. And then continuing John chapter 11, when Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." In verse 5 and 6, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Wait a minute. Now, John, are you saying what I think you're saying? That it took them 2 days to get to Jesus, and they said he's sick, and then he waited 2 more days to do anything. And that's exactly what happens. Now, John says, now listen, he loved them. Don't think he didn't care. Don't think he was not bothered by this. But he stayed where he was 2 more days. He tarried there. Exactly where he was. And so, basically what it appears that Jesus does in the text, he intentionally creates a traffic jam of spiritual and emotional needs for this family. He intentionally says, you got to wait. You got to have faith. You got to be patient. He intentionally waits 2 days before heading to the home of his friends. Now, John tells us what Jesus says, that listen, this isn't about death. This is about God's glory. Now, his sickness is not unto death, but that God may be glorified. Jesus knew that this situation with Lazarus was going to create a greater good. That a greater thing was going to happen because of Lazarus' situation than what could be done by just ameliorating or dealing with this man on his sick bed. That Jesus realized that something greater was going to happen because of this. That their needs, Mary and Martha, and I would say Lazarus' needs, are going to come second to God's needs. The most important thing that Jesus said here was that God be glorified. Now, I'll just tell you right now, I'm not too crazy about that idea that sometimes I have to put myself second to God. Because sometimes Mark wants what Mark wants. Does anyone else feel that way? And I want it now. God, if you please. I'm a pretty good feller. But what if, to help me develop spiritually, what if it take me to a place that I need to be that I can't get any other way? That God says, no, you have to wait. You have to be patient. This is about me and you. This is about what I'm trying to accomplish in the world. And I don't think that many of us are really ready to have our needs come second. I think most of us want our needs to come first. Continuing in John chapter 11. Then after this, after he waited 2 days, it's a 2-day journey. Then after this, he said, let us go to Judea again. And then the disciples said, listen, Rabbi, teacher, Jesus, you know, the last time we were there, it wasn't too good for us. The Jews actually sought to stone you. And you're going there again? Now, this is really important that we sort of pick this up because a statement's being made later by Thomas that sort of puts this in some better understanding. But he says, listen, are you sure you want to go to Judea? And Jesus said, yeah, let's go to Judea. So they head out toward Bethany, Judea. But they clearly feared for Jesus' life. And I think by implication, they're afraid there were not going to be one funeral, but 2 when they got there. That Lazarus would have died already. And that Jesus would be stoned and killed. But nevertheless, they go. And so in verse 11, Jesus makes this little statement. And it seems awkward and it seems somewhat disjointed from the flow of it. And I read it and reread it and read it again. And finally, something came to me and it makes sense to me. Maybe it'll make sense to you. And Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. Now, the last statement, the previous statement was, don't you think they're going to stone you when you get there? Then Jesus says, well, listen, you got to walk while it's daylight. Huh? It seems like a little awkward statement. Is it clear to anyone? No, not to me. Yeah. Now, here's my inspiration. John Wayne. And this quote's been attributed to John Wayne. Not for sure which movie it was in, but there's even some debate whether they actually ever said it. But I remember him saying, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. And essentially, I think that's what Jesus is telling them. I've got to do why it is still light. What my work to do is, you got to make hay while the sun shines. It's my time. The light's in the world. I've got to do it. Because the time will pass when it doesn't make sense to do it. And I've got to do it now. And so Jesus is essentially saying, it's time. I've got to go to Jerusalem. It's time. Now, again, John plays with the chronology of things. Okay, it is as if Lazarus' death and resurrection, that we're going to get to in just a minute, really foreshadows and creates the tension that leads to Jesus' crucifixion. But essentially, this is what Jesus says. It's time. Again, John chapter 11. These things he said to them, and after he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that it might wake him up. Then his disciple says, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. You see, these men, they're good men, but sometimes they don't have a clue. And so Jesus has said, well, it's time to go to Judea. Or sure you want to go? I've got to go. This has got to happen. And he said, Lazarus is asleep. And they said, oh, that's a good thing that he's getting some rest. He'll get better. And Jesus says, no, guys, he's dead. And I'm just so thankful that he's dead, because you're going to believe differently than had I been there. And so they head out 2 days journey to get there. Here's part of what's going on is as I see this text advancing, is that why did Jesus wait? And a question sometimes I have to ask is, and people ask me, is that why does God allow us to suffer? I know a lot of good people. Many of you here have really struggled and suffered with illness and emotional things and all kinds of, and not of anything of your own doing. I mean, the Scripture says if you suffer for your own doings, that's a good thing. But many people suffer and struggle with things all the time that has nothing to do with anything. And then the question is, why does God let good people suffer? And sometimes you see people who are not good out here doing things, and it seems like nothing ever happens to them. And really this creates sort of a traffic jam of faith. Your faith's going in that direction, but these things get in the way of it. It's like that pokey slow driver, or that person shifting. I can't get to where I want to go. I know where I want to go, but I can't get there. I don't know that any of us, when we get in traffic jams, makes us feel relaxed. Oh, thank goodness we don't drive fast. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Oh, wow, there's traffic jam. Red lights everywhere. Oh, I'm so peaceful. We don't feel that way, do we? But why does God, and this bothers me. Jesus said, what already said? He said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now that bothers me a little bit. Because on first read, it sounds like, well, you mean you let us suffer so you look good? I mean, I'll be real honest. That's sort of how that reads to me, that you let us suffer so you can look good. In fact, it would seem cruel if God lets us suffer for only God's benefit. His glory alone. That's a hard God to serve. But we know that's not the whole story. Paul even says, now, Paul's resume, shipwrecked, stoned, beaten, day and the night in the sea, in perils often, he says, forsaken by people who said they were his brothers and sisters, lied to, lied about, left for dead, bit by a snake, afflicted somehow with some kind of burden we don't really know what it was that he wanted God to take away. Look at his resume. And he says this, I consider the sufferings of the present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. Huh? It ain't nothing compared to what we're getting. In context, it's nothing. In fact, as parents, we sort of let our children struggle a little bit. What if you never let your child fall and scrape their knee? What if you never let them pulled up? What if you never let them take steps on their own? One, you make them very neurotic probably because that's what they're meant to do. But they never would develop. So we, as parents, we allow certain struggle in a child's life so they may grow. God allows struggle in our lives so that we may grow. I think if I ask the question, how many of us wish we had that mustard seed faith that Jesus said, that if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could say to a mountain, be ye moved? How many of us would say we'd love to have that kind of faith? Oh yeah, I want that. How many of us want to go through what it takes to get there? Well, I don't want that. I want that instant kind. You just add water and I got it. But sometimes you have to endure the hardship. Then John says that Thomas Didymus, Thomas the twin, he said, let us go also that we may die with him. And I spent most of my life reading this and thinking, oh, he wants to go die with Lazarus. No, he wants to go die with Jesus. If Jesus said a man's got to do what a man's got to do, and they're saying you're going to die, let's go die with him. And so that's what Thomas is signing up for. I'll go face the angry mobs with you. He's not. I'm sure he's grief stricken because of Lazarus, but not that. Well, let's go die with Lazarus. But he says, I want to die with you. So I think that was really important to clarify that point. But so he said, basically, we're going back to the angry mob in Judea. And at Jesus' death, Thomas says, I'm ready to die with the Lord. This was a man who remember, he struggled with, this was what we call, remember, doubting Thomas. He's the one who says, I won't believe he's resurrected unless I get to touch his wounds. I get to put my hands in his side. I will not believe it until I see it. But yet he's saying, here, I'm ready to die with the Lord. So 4 days have now gone past. Okay. In our experience, all the casserole dishes have been washed. The thank you cards have been made out. And the flowers have begun wilting. 4 days have passed. And Jesus is nearing Bethany. The word to Martha comes. And that's why I think maybe she's the oldest one. She's sort of matriarch maybe. There's no mention of the parents living. And so word comes to Martha, Jesus outskirts of town. So she gets up and leaves, and the people with her think she's gone to go to the cemetery, or to the grave. So she comes to Jesus and says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But now even I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. I don't know whether Martha does a quick check on herself to think, I've maybe crossed the boundary here, that sort of shaming Jesus that if he'd been here, he wouldn't have died. And she says, but I know. But for whatever reason, she puts her faith and trust in Jesus. Then Jesus says to her, I'm the resurrection and the life. He believes in me, though he may die, he shall live and never lives, and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? I mentioned in previous lessons that Jesus said, I am several times, and this is the 6th time he uses the phrase, I am. But this time he says, I'm the resurrection and the life. Last week in John chapter 2, Jesus says, I'm the door of the sheep. And in the context, that's a really interesting statement, because the sheepfolds are very often made of these enclosures, and they would drive the sheep in. And of course, there was a door, I read a story of a man was visiting over in the Holy Lands, and they took him to a sheepfold, and he noticed they had this stone enclosure for the sheep, and in just a little passageway, and he asked the people, he said, well, where's the gate? Where's the gate? And so the translator asked the shepherd, where's the gate? And he said, me? And what do you mean? I'm the gate. And so the habit was the shepherds would drive the sheep into the fold, and it came at night, and they'd actually get down, and they'd lay that opening on the ground and sleep. The sheep behind them, and the wolves and the predators out there, and they were the door. Let's see if I can get back up. No applause necessary. And so when Jesus says, I'm the door, it's me between the scary world and safety. And now he's saying, I'm the resurrection. It's me who stands between life and death. Do you believe this? And of course, she does. But she can't comprehend this. Then Mary comes out. And she says the same thing essentially that Martha says. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. And then Jesus sees her weeping. And the Jews came with her weeping. It's a scene. Some of us have been there, Dusty and Chris and those who work in the funeral home industry. You see it time and time again. Families come in and they're just broken down with grief, and you see it. You've witnessed. You've been there. And it says, and Jesus groaned in his spirit. Now, that's an interesting phrase there. The word there is a Greek word that's the same word that's meant when a horse makes an internal... Horses make a lot of grunt and snortles and stuff like that. And it's the same word that's used to talk about how the sounds a horse will make. It's a visceral, and he's broken in his spirit. And he says, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And then you have those two words. It's not the shortest in the Greek Bible, but it's the shortest in the English Bible, Scripture. Jesus wept. I'm the bread. I'm the life. I'm the living water. I'm the door. I'm the resurrection and the life. And he weeps. You know that thing about if God just lets us suffer just for his own glorification, that would be really cruel. But the thing is that even God knowing for our good, for our better, so that God may be glorified and we may have faith, he still hurts for us when we suffer. He wept. The psalmist who pursued God with his own heart said this in Psalms. You number my wanderings, put my tears into your bottle. Are they not in your book? It's really an interesting passage that it's almost as you have not shed one tear in your life that God has not measured and took note of. As accountant adds the ledger, every tear you have shed, God has added to your ledger. He is not unacquainted with our sufferings. He knows them full well. The Hebrews chapter 4 verse 15 says, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. That Jesus experiences this in his life. He knew full well what he was going to do. He knew full well what was going to happen. Continuing John chapter 11. And then when he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who died came out, bound hand and foot with gray clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to him, loose him and let him go. It was like the night of the mummy. The tombs there were different than how we're accustomed. You know, we dig a grave, we bury a body in a grave. They had a stone, like cave-like thing that they used for a tomb, and it was reserved for the whole family type thing. And so they would take a body in there, they do all this burial stuff, they'd wrap it up in spices and in a way to be dignified, and they'd wrap it in linen and stuff like that. And they would wait for a year, and after a year, they would go back and take those remains and put them in a stone box, an ossuary. Then they put this on the shelf with everybody, they'd have, grandma and grandpa's and everybody's little box on the shelf. That's how they did it. Different than we do it, just different. Not wrong, just different. Okay. And so, Brother Charles Lemons made this statement one time. Jesus had to say, Lazarus, come forth, because if Jesus had came forth, the grave would have been empty. Right? Bone to bone, and sinew to sinew, and flesh to flesh, and walking again. And he had to be very specific to say, Lazarus, come forth. The family's reunited. And what we see happening is that Jesus wept. So as we begin bringing this lesson to close, what is the traffic jam of your faith? Maybe this morning you're rolling along without a care. Maybe you feel like, hey, this is my season of faith. I just feel so full of joy and peace. And I will say, God bless you. You may say, man, I have trials and temptations and struggles that I just don't know that my faith will sometimes bear. And I'm going to say, God bless you. Both situations, God is up to something. And something big. There's not a thing that you're experiencing right now that God has not been aware of. But the Apostle Paul, again to put it in context, remember his resume, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the heart of man the things which God's prepared for those who love Him. So ever how big your imagination is, you ain't got it yet. You've not got it yet. God's got big things in store. I'm not trying to be ominous or pessimistic. Those of you who know me tend to know I'm just the opposite, to be pretty optimistic. But I want to be a realist, that you have traffic jams ahead. We all do. Now, we can fuss and fume. But let me ask you this. If you're traveling and you're in a traffic jam, it's a lot more stressful than if you're on I-40 and maybe there's a traffic jam. You know, I'm on my way home. I'll be home in a few minutes. It's slow. I'm not getting there quite just yet. But I know where I'm going. I know I'll get a good place. I think traffic jams going away from home to someplace else are a lot more stressful than the ones we're experiencing heading home. Oh, we'll get home eventually. We'll be a little bit later. Okay. If you have a home to go to, we can handle this stuff, right? If our salvation is assured, we can put it on perspective. But if you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, I don't know. I don't understand why not being a Christian. I don't understand why do you forfeit peace? Why do you lay your head down the pillow at night not knowing for certain you have a home secured? I don't understand that. I was very young, 12, when I became a Christian, and I have no question I knew what I was doing, and I did it for the right reason. But there are times in people's lives I just don't know. So you need to have that answer assured in your heart that, you know, if you're struggling right now and you just need to be encouraged, you know, maybe need some other folks stuck in traffic, give you a friendly wave. Yeah, we're there too. We're with you. But if you accept the Lord's invitation this morning, won't you come as we sing the song Brother Adam selected?